members, and good evening officers, good evening members of the public, and good evening to all those watching this broadcast on YouTube. So our planning committee this evening will move on to the agenda. So the first item is apologies for absence. We do not have any apologies, everybody's here this evening. So that's very good. Move on to item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda having regard to the Code of Conduct for members? Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can I declare a non-pecuniary interest in item 5D on this evening's agenda, application number 23012443, the application by Landsec. I chaired a committee meeting on the 2nd of July where I may have expressed an opinion specifically on what they are proposing. So for probity, I think it's best if I leave the meeting and don't vote on the topic. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I note that. Anybody else? No hands are up, so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is minutes of the previous meeting. I have before me the minutes of the meeting on the 25th of July of this year. Is it your wish that I should sign these as a correct record? Can somebody move that? Councillor Spray and seconder? Councillor Monday, thank you. I shall sign those minutes now. Item 4, public question times. We don't have any registered speakers who want to speak on a general matter of planning, so we will now move on to planning applications, item 5 on the agenda. Members, as you've already been informed, but it may not be, those who are watching on the broadcast may not be aware, but item 5A, which was application number 21/01966 full, which is at Ferriers Farm, Ferriers Lane, Bures Hamlet. That application has been withdrawn, so we will not be deciding that this evening. So that moves us on to application 5B and actually application 5C. So that is the applications relating to the Castle Public House, 77 High Street, Earls Colne. The first application is full application and it's number 21/02719. The second application is a list of building consent, application number 21/02720. We have a number of speakers on these applications, so I will call the first speaker to the table there, Dr. Andrew Fleetwood. Dr. Fleetwood, you've got 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Andrew Fleetwood. I'm here to represent the views of a number of my neighbours who've previously submitted written objections to the plans, and we're very grateful for the committee for the opportunity to highlight 5 of those to you today. First of all, we're concerned at the loss of a commercial premises on what is a vibrant high street. We've not seen adequate evidence that the premises is commercially unviable, or that attempts have been made to make it viable. The castle is a historically valuable building, and we consider it regrettable to see one of the few remaining intact hall houses divided up and to simultaneously see its use from commercial or community use, such as being used as a restaurant. Second, we have significant concerns about overdevelopment of the entire site. The plans create a density of housing totally out of character for the conservation zone in general and the historic nature of the castle in particular. Third, the wooded margin consists of mature and growing trees, which provides a green corridor around the proposed site. This is heavily populated by wildlife, and it forms an important part of the visual amenity of the conservation zone. A substantial portion of this green corridor is proposed to be felled, which will break the corridor. And very importantly, we've noticed that the latest site plans dated February 2023 are not consistent with the tree survey. The orientation of dwellings 4 and 5 on the latest site plan has changed such that the earlier tree survey is now invalid and the root protection area of numerous additional trees will be encroached upon. And furthermore, the above ground construction would require crown reduction of numerous trees, meaning that construction of dwellings 4 and 5 will be likely to damage or lose a large proportion of the existing tree boundary. A number of the impacted trees are owned by neighbours, not by the castle, and intrusion into the root protection area of neighbours' trees is not acceptable. Overall, we consider this an unacceptable degree of damage to the natural environment and loss of amenity for wildlife and humans. Fourth, the loss and damage to the tree boundary means that the proposed built environment, and dwellings 4 and 5 in particular, will visually intrude in a major way and create overlooking issues for my property, adjacent properties to the east on the High Street, that's numbers 79 to 81, opposite on the High Street, to the west on the High Street, and behind in Oxford Court. The loss of trees and the fact that the bulk of the boundary is deciduous means that there will be minimal mitigation of this visual intrusion. Finally, the provision of parking appears to be inappropriate for the scale and the historic constraints of the site, and there's no facility for overflow parking on the High Street, which is already suffering from danger and accident associated with poor sight lines and parked cars. This development is likely to worsen an already dangerous situation where there have been several accidents just in the few recent months. So in summary, we have numerous objections which stem from inappropriate and overdevelopment of a historic site within the conservation zone, and we do not believe that the provision of luxury housing outweighs the loss of amenity, the degrading of the conservation area, and the overlooking issues for neighbours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fleetwood. I now call upon Councillor Rann, who's going to speak on behalf of Earlscombe Parish Council.
Thank you. The whole Parish Council discussed this application in the monthly meetings on at least 3 occasions, and the decisions have been the same each time. As a council, we object on the following grounds. A. We object to the change of use from commercial to residential in what is a vibrant high street, in a village which is growing rather than shrinking. Although we have no further development scheduled in the time span of the most recent local plan, we are a serviced village and know that more development will come eventually, which makes the loss of a commercial premises short-sighted and which is rarely reversible. Additionally, we dispute that any attempt was made at all by the current owner to try and operate commercially, and there is evidence that other bidders at the time of purchase wished to continue operating premises as a pub. B. Overlooking. There would be an adverse impact on at least 6 neighbouring properties, creating issues with privacy due to overlooking from the proposed houses on the car park and from apartment windows. C. Overdevelopment. The density of the proposed development would impact adversely on the surrounding properties in what is already a full residential area and appears unsuitable for a conservation zone where the ancient buildings protected by listing would be compromised and their importance minimised. D. Gating the access. We feel gating the access might lead to the backing up of vehicles onto the high street, where speed issues and sightlines are already a problem and accidents common. It would also adversely affect the neighbour to the immediate left, who has a right of access for loading and unloading. E. Parking. The Parish Council feel that inadequate parking is provided in the scheme, which would therefore impact on the village as a whole, where parking is already at a premium, especially on the high street. The proposed allocation does not account for the average of more than 2 cars per residence, or for visitors or deliveries and tradespeople, when little availability exists on the high street. F. Housing needs. From work the council have done towards their forthcoming neighbourhood plan, we know that the type of properties the village is in need of are starter homes and houses to cater for the elderly of the village or for downsizing. And these properties do not fulfil that brief. The proposal describes providing 5 additional homes for the village. That actually only creates 4, as one has existed above the pub for many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ranns. We'll now move on to the presentation, which will be given by Catherine, and I think you're going to do the 2 applications together, Catherine?
Yes, I am, yeah. Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. So the applications before you are a planning application and a related listed building application for change of use of the public house, the castle in Ellscombe in the High Street, to 3 dwellings and the addition of 2 dwellings within the curtilage behind, with the provision of car parking and amenity spaces and hard landscaping. So this is the castle here. You can see that it's a sort of C-shaped building with an internal courtyard in the middle. It's got an access. Its main access is to the left-hand side here, so that's to the west. And then there is also another access on the eastern side which doesn't serve the pub but goes down to an electricity substation, telephone exchange, and serves some dwellings here. You'll note that there's further dwellings on either side, and behind there's a modern development of residential houses sort of in this location here. So in terms of constraints, the property is Grade 2 listed, and it's within the conservation area, excuse the typo there. There are a number of trees on the estate behind which are the subject of tree preservation orders. However, none of those trees lie on the boundaries of the site, as you'll see sort of later in the presentation. The development boundary of the village is marked by the black line here. You can just sort of see it's obviously within it. The purple dotted line, it refers to the designation of local centre within the local plan. And for your information, it's also within the Habitats Regulation Zone of Influence, Assessment Zone of Influence. So just looking at the aerial photograph here, this is the castle here. And you can see there's a car park behind and a grassed area. And you'll note that there's the trees in this location here and the high street to the south. So the castle itself has got sort of quite striking frontage here with imitation ashlar, peg tile roof, and some very noticeable chimneys as well. This is what's referred to as the eastern flank elevation, as you'll see later on. You'll also note that there are car parking spaces on the high street immediately in front of the castle. This is the access to the west. So this is the western flank of the castle. You can just make out the sort of outbuildings which are attached to it on the rear of the courtyard here. You'll see the trees which are on the perimeter of the site and the neighbour in the yellow building. And this is looking the other way, so down towards the high street, standing on the site. And this is the western elevation of the castle, the neighbour here, and the driveway access here. As you sort of stand further into the site, so you're now sort of on the northern boundary really, and looking towards the high street, you can see the cars which are currently parked in the car park area, which I understand it's sort of being used as a bit of a public car park at the moment. There are these outbuildings attached to the castle here. They're also listed because they're attached. And this is the main building that fronts the high street here. So in terms of the layout, you'll see the existing layout here, the C shape, the internal courtyard, the land behind and the trees, which are on the boundary of the site. And this is what's been proposed in the latest revision. So you have 2 dwellings to the rear. They're detached 4-bedroom and 3-bedroom dwelling. There's tandem parking for the 3-bedroom dwelling and parking for the 4-bedroom dwelling with a visitor space over here. The parking arrangements for the units will be shown in the next slides, but you'll notice the gardens which serve 2 of the units here are to be provided in the central space of the courtyard. So in terms of trees, I'll just flick back for you, and you'll note that this plan shows the trees which are being removed. So they are marked by that red line, and you'll see there, with reference to the comments which have been made by speakers, the proximity of the 3-bedroom dwelling and its relationship with the trees which are proposed to be retained. And if you look at this plan here, this shows the works to the trees in more detail. So that blue line there shows the root protection area of trees which are to be retained. They're sycamores, I believe, and it's arguable whether the dwelling itself would incur into that root protection area. So I should explain to you that the comments from the landscape advisor were provided in January, in these revisions, of February revisions. So we haven't got an updated plan for you, but I think I'll go through with you the works to the trees. I think it's evident, obviously, that there will be works to the trees, and that there's the sense of undeveloped space in this area, and the contribution made by the existing trees has been covered in your report assessment. And it was concluded that the harm to the conservation area would arise from their loss, and that's been factored in to the assessment and the planning balance in the conclusion. The loss of the trees obviously is significant for many reasons, because they provide visual amenity. Then also, looking at these plans, you can see the close relationship of the dwellings to them would result in quite a shaded garden space for those dwellings, and close proximity to them. So this plan here shows basically that all the trees that overhang the site would be essentially crown lifted or crown reduced in order to prevent them overhanging. Some of those trees obviously do lie in neighbours' gardens, some of them lie on the site itself. In addition, there's an area down here in Group 2 where there would need to be hand-dig construction of the parking area, and similarly hand-dig construction up here for these trees in order to remove the existing hard standing which lies in that area. Okay, so this is a picture of the trees themselves, really. So this is the group that are currently proposed to be lost. These are the ones which are still very close to the proposed dwellings, and then you've got these ones along the boundary, which would obviously also be cut back into the boundary line. And if you were to go down the access to the east of the public house, which leads down to the electricity substation, this is the electricity substation, and you can see the trees on the boundary of the site from there. And these are the ones which would also, this is the group that would be lost. So you're seeing it from outside the site from that angle. So in terms of the plans themselves, this is the ground floor plans for you. So you'll see that a unit would be created here facing onto the high street. Another unit is proposed to be created in this section here on the eastern sort of element. And then a unit would be created above the outbuildings. Now, the outbuildings are arranged at the moment, but part of them would be demolished and rebuilt, so this area here, in order to facilitate the car parking areas being provided. And you'll note on the plans that there are some areas on the ground floor which haven't been surveyed. So that's within the range of outbuildings here and around the chimney. You'll also see that there's quite a lot of work proposed around that chimney area. So we don't have any information about what's in that area, the historic significance of it, whether the works themselves minimise the impact on the listed building. It's not possible for us to make a judgment on that with the information provided, and that's one of our issues with the submission. And again, at the first floor, there's a large area in the range of outbuildings and the first floor of the pub itself, which again hasn't been surveyed, so we don't have any information about. You'll note that there's some roof lights being proposed sort of in this roof here, and no information about the fabric that would be removed there. Similarly, there's some windows proposed. So on the western flank of the building, it's proposed to uncover an existing window. Now, that window, we don't have any information about the fabric that's within it or its historic significance, so it's not possible for us to ascertain whether that would be acceptable or not. Similarly, on the eastern side here, there's also a window proposed to be inserted. Again, very little information about the fabric that would be removed, precisely where it would go, and whether it's absolutely necessary to do that, whether you could achieve a different floor layout, for example, and not have to create that opening and lose that fabric. So this is the front elevation here as it is existing. You'll see this is as proposed, and there's a window that would be changed to a front door. Historic Buildings Advice doesn't have an issue with that, but this is the window to be inserted in the western flank, and this is the part of the outbuilding or portion of the outbuildings that would be demolished, sort of shown in the red circle. I'm just showing you the frontage there, just so that you can remember what it looks like. And similarly here. And that's that portion of the outbuilding that would be demolished. So then if we travel to the rear of the site and we're looking directly at those outbuildings, sort of looking south to say really, you can see the works that are proposed here. Now, in terms of the works that are proposed, there are some considerable concerns over the design of them in terms of detailing, general approach to the carriage arches here, and overall whether it's necessary what the impact really is of the roof lights and the demolishing of that portion of the outbuilding. The eastern side, this is that view that I was referring to currently. This is the internal courtyard. So one beneficial element of the submission is the removal of some modern elements which are in the internal courtyard area. So there's a glazed link, which is currently there, which would be removed, and a porch, which should also be removed. There would be some alterations to the fenestration, creation of these sort of longer windows which overlook the gardens below. So that's that porch there that's being removed, and the glazed link also to be removed. You sort of get an impression here of the size of the courtyard area, which would form 2 gardens as proposed. And the dwellings as proposed to the rear, they are proposed to be constructed of traditional materials with red brick and timber boarding above, clay plain tile roofs and painted timber doors and windows. However, the form of the dwellings is overwhelmingly suburban in our consideration, and generic in appearance essentially. Doesn't, in our view, reflect the historic surroundings or enhance local distinctiveness. They have a sort of chalet style which is quite contrived and overcomplicated. The timber half boarding is not particularly reflective of the area. Their busy roof form. The scale of the side wings is a concern, as is the large openings being created in the rear elevation here. Modern fenestration pattern not reflective of the area, lack of chimneys not reflective. Generally incongruous in our view. Bland and lacking in aesthetic detail. So, I mean, obviously, there are a lot of facets to this application. I can't go through all of them in my presentation. So if you do have any questions, then please ask, and we can go back to some of the slides and sort of explain. But the recommendation for the planning permission is for refusal on the basis of insufficient evidence for the loss of the pub use, the harm to the listed building in the conservation area, coupled with insufficient information on heritage impact and general poor design, which leads to concerns over amenity, refuse arrangements, parking, etc. Generally, overdevelopment of the site, I think, and thus contrary to the development plan and the PPF as a whole. And in terms of the listed building consent, this obviously doesn't cover the dwellings, so only considers the conversion, harm to the listed building in the conservation area, and insufficient information on heritage impact. There is a slight correction in terms of the reason for refusal to, and if has been missed out, so it should read, furthermore, there is a lack of survey information describing the significance of the local heritage asset and the impact of the works upon it. And as a consequence, the local planning authority is unable to determine if the full impact of the works proposed, including the openings in the flanks of the listed buildings, works to the openings, works to the outbuildings, and works to the eastern wing of the listed building, particularly in the vicinity of the chimney stack, are acceptable. So hopefully that makes a little more sense for you. Over to you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for summarising that so neatly. A rather complicated couple of applications. Councillor Spray had her hand up first, so I'll pass over to Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, and thank you, Catherine, for your very comprehensive presentation. Well, I know this site very well because it's in my village. I have to say how really disappointing it is that after probably getting on for 2 years at least, that we don't have a more positive proposal in front of us. The longer this building, which is historically important in the village, the longer it stays empty and nothing happens to it, the more shabby it looks and the more it deteriorates. It's been backwards and forwards a number of times between our officers and the applicant, with absolutely minimal results from what I can see. I mean, the most positive things that the historic buildings consultant can find to say is that the porch and the glazed link will be removed, and there are a couple of other things which is good, but nothing else really does it justice. I mean, at the very least, there ought to be an application which at least pays respect to the historic aspects of this building. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail because Catherine's done a really good job of that, but we've got 3 separate consultations with the building consultant. December 2021, October 2022, and then April this year. And in each one, you know, they say previous concerns have not been addressed. There is information missing that's been asked for, and I think that of particular concern is some of the detail inside the building, which is really old and really important. There is no information as to how those things are going to be dealt with during construction or preserved. The 2 new buildings, I mean, are described in the report as very convoluted and squat, and just don't fit. I know that there has inevitably been a lot of discussion locally about this, and actually, on balance, probably most people feel they would like to see something happen to the building, but ideally not with 2 new houses in car park, which I think does constitute overdevelopment. You know, it's not up to us as a local authority to say what happens to it. We can't say we definitely need it to be a pub or a commercial premises or housing, but we can at least make a decision on what is, you know, before us this evening. I'll just touch briefly on a couple of other things. Parking, that's aroused a lot of comment locally. It actually, I think if I've read it right, does meet the parking standards, well, for the dwellings. It falls short on the visitor parking, and I think there's a comment in here somewhere that demonstrates the yes, it's symptomatic of the overdevelopment of the site that the required number of parking spaces cannot be provided. And I think finally, the fact that we don't have the financial information, or officers haven't had that demonstrates clearly that it was not viable as a public house before it was closed down, and that is a requirement that you need to demonstrate that. So yes, Chairman, overall really disappointing, and I will leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. One word comes to my mind with this applicant is chancer, really, because there is absolutely nothing in this application that I can actually say is positive for that site. Worries me that the applicant thinks that it even is correct, but that's up to them. Councillor Spray has just mentioned part of what I was going to ask, because in the past, and I'm assuming this is still so, that if somebody was going to sell a public house and change it to a residential development, whatever, then they have to prove to this authority where they've tried to sell it, how they've tried to sell it, what interest they've had in it, etc. Now, there was mention in public question time of there was other people interested in the property. So that may well be fact, but have we had that information from this applicant in the first instance that we should have had? Thank you.
No, we haven't. We've got a statement from Fleuret, who were the estate agents for the property, and it's only 1 page. It says on it that there was, I think, 16 expressions of interest in the site, and that in the end there were a number of offers, and it was invited to go to a bid on the highest offer, and the applicant was successful. So there was evidence that there was quite a lot of interest in buying the pub. And we don't obviously know whether that was as a going concern or not, but my understanding is that the applicant, after buying the pub, closed it, did not attempt to operate it, therefore cannot provide any information as to whether it was viable or not. And therefore, we don't have any information which satisfies the policy, so it's contrary to the policy, and then you obviously have to weigh, you have to decide what weight to give that contradiction in your planning balance.
Kathy, could I just clarify, so there's been no recent marketing evidence provided?
No, so I think it was, marketed in 2017, and there's not been any evidence of any marketing since then. So it's not been kept for sale or anything. The applicant obviously bought it, presumably with the intention of making the application, because it doesn't seem to have been with the intention of sort of running it as a pub.
Thank you for clarifying that. Councillor Beavis, then Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I concur with all the comments from Councillor Spray and Councillor Bowers-Flint. I mean, I know the area quite well myself, and actually there are lots of buildings around our district. I can think of a couple in my own ward which have sat there for 20 to 30 years and are of historic value, and they're not crumbling drastically, but they do sit there until the time is right. And, you know, we can't actually tell the applicant what we think they should be doing, but we can at least acknowledge as an authority how the local community feel about this. And we've got a very strong parish council at Elscombe, and they've set out the reasons why they're unhappy, as have a collection of local residents. And in fact, there are some walking groups in Elscombe at the moment that look at a lot of the historic buildings in the village, and it's quite gratifying when one drives through the village and sees that, because it helps you to confirm how important the village is. And I don't think that, you know, we should be rushing at this in the fear that this building is going to crumble, because the buildings in my ward are still standing until, you know, the right moment arises. I'm not 100% sure that our summary of the recommended refusal goes quite far enough in, I think it's lacking in its historic recognition. I don't think it's just about being concerned about the heritage impact. I don't think there's anything within the application that I've seen that sympathises in any way. And we've only got to look at this amazing picture above, I think, the fireplace on the ground floor. And yes, we are kind of testing this on its recent history as a village pub, but this is a medieval hall, you know, of some gravitas. And, you know, when you think of Gosfield and the hall there, and Castle, Edingham, the castle, all of this stuff is the richness of that community. And I think at least we can sympathise and recognise that more must be done. Personally, I wouldn't want to see this go as a solely private residential use. I think it's not right for the village at all. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As well as echoing Councillor Spray's comments about the quality of the work of our officers, I also wanted to congratulate the members of the public who've come here this evening for the quality of their depositions. And I note that almost every issue that they're raising is echoed by our officers in the report. And I find their depositions compelling, and the arguments therein are compelling. I do feel that this is badly planned, and I know from personal experience that the amenity value of trees in the built environment is great, and certainly we should not be doing away with them without really good reason so to do. I personally believe that the lack of that the proposal is beset by issues like a lack of amenity space for the dwellings that are proposed. I can't believe that they will make attractive exterior spaces for the houses that are proposed. I also approach things like this personally with the view that pubs and restaurants, which to my mind is the natural use of this building in order to make it sustainable, that use is about community building and as a community hub, in the way that other buildings like village halls are. They're an important part of building community, and so we should not give them up willingly, nor indeed should we give up willingly the economic churn and economic benefit of the activity that goes on inside businesses like that. So when I take all of these things together, and I've listened carefully to the officers' comments about lack of detail around various issues, but I personally believe that if those issues were in fact fleshed out in detail, they still would not produce a proposal where the benefit outweighed the detriments, and the detriments with respect to the historic asset are very great. So all of this taken together, I just wanted to express my strong sympathy with the case made by all parties. And if nobody else wishes to, I would move officer recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Does that find a seconder for it? Councillor Abbott, would you like to? You wanted to speak anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I was very interested in the evidence on the change of use from a pub to residential, and what the parish council had to say, that they believe that one of the bidders, at least, would have been prepared to continue as a pub, and even if that wasn't the case, we still don't have any financial information at all, which tells us that in the current environment, that the building would not be viable as a pub. The impacts on heritage assets are very complex, I think, to put it mildly, but it's a reason for refusal, several reasons for refusal actually. And I was very interested in the history and how far back this building goes. It's clearly a very old building. And you might not be surprised to know I was very interested in the impact on trees. And I've got a question on that because I think it's a new one on me. Paragraph 11.4.3, it says that if we granted this, then deemed consent is given for the works to the trees. They wouldn't need to come back for a conservation area application separately, getting nods from the officer, which is helpful. How is that possible when most of the works to the trees are on trees which does not belong to the applicant, they belong to neighbouring properties? For example, T003, an ash tree, proposed to be crown reduced. Well, that means you reduce the radius of the crown in its entirety, which, unless you were using very incredible equipment, would require going into the neighbour's property. So is the report saying that if we granted this, it overrides the ability of the neighbours who own the trees to resist tree surgeons coming onto their property to do the works? Because I don't believe it would. And therefore, is that paragraph actually correct?
Are you going to answer that, Chris? Yep, Chris.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So, I think, strictly speaking, the consent would still be required for the owner, from the owner of the tree. So, in those circumstances where the tree is actually sited over the property boundary, they would still need the consent from the owners to be able to undertake the full extent of the work. So, it becomes a civil matter as well. So, typically, where you have those trees that cross boundaries, you can usually cut back vegetation to your boundary. But if it's a protected tree, or if you would still need the consent, I think, from the owner. So I think we'd set out the position in terms of the conservation area consent and the notification, but yeah, there would still be a separate matter that would need to be cleared effectively on that.
Yeah, that's what I thought was the case, and so the report's not quite correct in that case. So the works would not be deliverable unless the owners of the trees agreed to them. And you could end up with a situation where trees have been crown lifted one side but not the other, or crown reduced one side not the other, which is not good for their health. It can leave them unbalanced. So I just thought I'd explore that because it's quite an unusual situation. And of course the other point is, as the officer rightly said, is that for one of the properties to be built in the rear courtyard area, There's an existing tree which is shown literally touching the building. Well, we know what's going to happen there. There will be enormous pressure to fell it or to carry out very heavy works. So, yes, for all those reasons, Madam Chairman, I'm happy to second refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. I don't think your comments affect the reasons for refusal that be put forward for refusal. Do they know? Okay. Does any other member wish to make a comment? Right. So, Councillor Richard, have you got your pen up? Or?
Yeah, actually, very briefly. I think it's a real shame, as much as this building has probably been one of the cornerstones of Elscombe as a village right from the start. It's well over 500 years old. And I think some of the details that the applicant has provided to make the changes to this building almost mock the character of that building. And just one example of that is the way they've tried to squeeze the parking as part of that design. It's almost, it is incongruous to the whole nature of that very building. And as has been said by a number of councillors, I think we owe it to buildings like this to ensure that their longevity is sustained. And alongside that is the right development that's put alongside that. It's not that we're against any development on that site, but this is completely the wrong type of development. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, members. So I think I'll put this to the vote. So it's been moved by Councillor Holland and seconded by Councillor Munday that we refuse this. Oh, sorry. Seconded by Councillor Abbott, correct, sorry. So we're going to take each application in turn, actually. So I think we'll start with the full application. So yes, it's been moved by Councillor Holland, seconded by Councillor Abbott, that we refuse this application, which is number 21/02719. All those in favour of refusal? That members is unanimous. Thank you. And now we'll move on to list of building consent application, which is number 21/02720. I take it, Councillor Holland, are you also moving that application refusal? And Councillor Abbott? Thank you. So again, that's been moved by Councillor Holland, seconded by Councillor Abbott, that we refuse the list of building consent. All those in favour of refusal? That application, that is unanimous, and that application has been refused as well. Thank you very much, members. I don't know if any members of the public wish to leave or wish to stay for the next application. You're very welcome to leave. Right, thank you, members. So we just have one more application this evening, which is application agenda item number 5D, which is application number 23/01248 full, which is an application at Braintree Village in Charterway, Braintree. We don't have any speakers on this application, so I will ask Lisa to give the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. This is a full application for the temporary change of use to provide an ice rink and associated facilities for a period of 12 weeks per year from 2023 until 2028 at Braintree Village, Charterway in Braintree. Here's a location plan. You can see the site edged in red. The site is located within the wider Braintree Village site. To the east, you have Millennium Way and the B1018. To the south lies the service yard here and the wider commercial units within Braintree Village. To the west is the Braintree Village North car park here. So just an aerial photograph here that shows the site. So the site is within this area of land here. It's a vacant grassland area. The site itself is devoid of any landscaping, but there is a hedgerow planting between the site and the car park, so where my cursor is, and shrub and tree planting along the B1018. Turning to the block plan here, this shows the siting of the largest marquee. So this hatching is the largest marquee. That would measure 55 by 30 metres. Attached to the back are two smaller marquees, which would be the staff room and the ice resurfacing machine. They are measure 5 by 5 metres. And also to the rear here, you can see some condenser and chiller units. Pedestrian access to the marquee ice rink would be from the western elevation here, and there's an existing gap in the hedge that is due to be widened to allow pedestrian access. The application has been submitted with the pedestrian safety plan, which sets out how pedestrian movements to and from the site would be managed. That is detailed in the committee report, but consists of the cordoning off of 12 existing car parking spaces and crowd barriers being erected, and those crowd barriers would also extend in front of this service yard area here and would be manned by security and car park staff whilst the ice rink is operational. In terms of elevations, this shows the main marquee structure, so again you can see the size of it. It would have a maximum height of 7.68 metres. You can see the smaller marquee here to the rear, and you can sort of see it sort of through the marquee there. These have a maximum height of 5.37 metres, and here is a smaller box office that would be to that front western elevation. Some other elevations here, so just here in particular to the bottom of the slide shows the scale of the built form and how it relates to existing buildings on Braintree Village. Looking at some photographs here, this is a photograph taken from within the site looking east towards the B1018. You can see Braintree Village just on the right hand side here, and there are some existing sort of structures there within that sort of otherwise undeveloped area of land. Another photograph here, which is also to the north-eastern boundary with the B1018. This is the area of land here where my cursor is. That will be subject to being planted with a wildflower grassland mix and the 10-metre stretch of replacement hedgerow to mitigate and secure biodiversity net gain. Another photograph here taken from within the existing car park looking towards the development site. So you can see where my cursor is, there is an existing gap within the otherwise uniform hedge that adjoins that car park. This is proposed to be widened by 2 metres to allow that pedestrian access in, and hence why there's the mitigation proposal for replacement hedging elsewhere on the site. These are the parking spaces that will be cordoned off, and you would have the crowd barriers to allow safe pedestrian movements to the site. Now, there is a member update for you this evening. A member update report has previously been circulated. This sets out that the previously proposed hard-standing sub-base has been removed from the application. The application, or the marquee structure, will now be placed directly onto the ground with the use of supports incorporated into the design of the ice rink. This does result in 2 benefits to which positive weight is assigned. So firstly, it removes the visual harm that would have been associated with the hard standing that on the original application was due to be retained for the 5-year period. The other benefit relates to the loss of the grassland now only being temporary for the 12-week period each year. With the removal of the hard standing, because there's no increase in non-permeable surfacing, the local Leaf Flood Authority have confirmed there is no longer any need for the conditions relating to drainage, and it's recommended that Condition 9 is therefore not imposed on any permission to grant. Condition 10 is also proposed to be removed, and that relates to the hard surfacing detailing, and therefore there's also an associated change to the approved plan, so two different versions, later versions to supersede earlier versions. So in terms of a summary, the site does lie within the defined town boundary where the principle of development is acceptable. The use would complement the existing uses at Braintree Village. The development would create wider benefits to the district in terms of the local economy. The layout and design is considered acceptable and will relate well to the adjacent Braintree Village complex. There'll be no harm to the wider character and appearance of the locality. The proposed lighting would be seen within the context of existing lighting in the car park and on the B1018. Compensation is proposed for the removal of the hedgerow, which is required to facilitate the pedestrian access. In addition, adjacent land would be planted with a wildflower grassland mix, and this would create secure biodiversity net gain. Highway matters are considered acceptable, and the existing car park would acceptably serve the development. Many of the trips are considered to be linked visits with the wider Braintree village. Pedestrian access via the car park is via the car park and the northern access, and an appropriate pedestrian safety plan has been provided which sets out how pedestrian movements will be managed. The development would create no harm to neighbouring amenity, and matters in regards to flood risk and drainage are considered acceptable, and therefore our recommendation to you this evening, members, is that planning permission be granted subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Members. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't have an objection to this in principle, and I think this improved design in terms of leaving the surface onto existing ground rather than digging it up and putting material in. I've got a couple of questions though. Page 113 and the Officer of Comments, it's that lighting proposed would sort of merge in, I think was the comments, with what's there now. Well, the shopping village and Gully's Corner are the biggest sources of light pollution on that side of Braintree. I mean, they're visible from a long distance away. You can see them. You can see the lights directly from Black Knockley, for example. I don't think we should just accept even more light pollution. There's no detail in the officer's report about the design other than it says 12 100-watt floodlights. If they're LEDs, that's incredibly bright. So I've got three questions around that. One is, why are they needed? So presumably this is external rather than internal, and it's an enclosed structure which would have lighting inside it anyway. I'm assuming that's right. Why so many floodlights when there's a lit car park literally adjacent to it? I don't know if everyone saw in the photographs, the car park there is lit with standard column streetlights. So presumably you wouldn't need that much extra. You would need some, but not that much extra. Secondly, what is the design of the lights? Are they designed to aim downwards? I know there's a reference to a report, but my apologies, I didn't have time to read it tonight, so that's the reason I'm asking the questions. And thirdly, if the lights are to be allowed, would they be timer controlled to the hours of business, which are no later than 10 p.m? Thank you.
Lisa, can you answer those questions?
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Yes, so those lights referred to, the 12 lights, are external lighting. In terms of the need, I assume they would relate to the later hours of opening. So the ice rink would be open to members of the public from 10 a.m. until 10 p.m. So I think it would be for later on in the evening, obviously in the winter months, those lighting would be required. I was just trying to quickly have a look at the design to see whether that plan that's referenced in one of the conditions, condition 8, refers to lighting. I would just have a look to see whether the design is incorporated into that. Bear with me. No, so that the plan that's cited within condition 8 doesn't make reference to, doesn't include the design, it just includes that sort of wattage or flood lighting. So we could, if you were minded to require it, alter that condition to require details of the design to be agreed.
Yeah, I'm happy to move it on that basis, so that the design, obviously we're looking for lights that shine downwards to the intended area and not across the landscape into the sky, and secondly that they go off when the use ceases.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm happy to move it on that basis.
Members, Councillor Bass-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was hoping, as Ward Member Councillor Abbott was going to mention this, but as he hasn't, I will. This area, without this facility, is a bugbear to the people who live in Cressing and anybody who's using along the 1018. The queues of traffic now go right back to Mill Lane in Cressing at peak times because people are trying to get into Freeport, and it's purely and simply, most of it, although it's popular, and I know this would be popular, and I've had these arguments with Braintree Village even before, when it was Freeport, about their signage. And what happens is people get to the garden centre roundabout, then they go up the dual carriageway this is when they start moving, and they queue, and they queue, and they queue, and everybody turns left because they think that that is the car park, when the proper car park to the village is at the set of traffic lights. Now, as locals, we know that, but Braintree Village will tell you that 90% of their customers come from outside of the district, outside of the county even. So directional signs to the car park is really important, and even more important now because there will be more people using this. So whilst the highways haven't objected, but we know that highways don't object to anything like this, and they most probably have not seen the queues of traffic all the time. And them queues just used to be on a Saturday and Sunday, and unfortunately now they're there during the week. And we all know that the food establishments, and the more they have of them, the more it contributes to the queuing, because they can't get up that road neither to them. So it's just a bottleneck, and it's horrendous. But even simple car parking signage to direct people straight on rather than turn left, because in actual fact, Braintree Village don't own that car park, the first car park. Their car park is the one that's on these plans. So to get some signage some way or another directing the people to the second car park, I would be extremely grateful, and so would all the people who sit in the traffic when they're trying to go anywhere. Also, we're saying any 12-week period. Has a period been stated? Because if this is at Christmas time, then it will be horrendous. It really will.
Thank you.
Please, can you answer that point about the timing?
Yes, so they're looking to have it sort of, it would be around the Christmas period, so sort of September into sort of the first week in January, that sort of timescale.
Yes, can I ask, are we able to put any condition on in relation to the signage?
So if members were minded, what we could do is add an additional condition for a signage strategy, because obviously any advertisements that would need to be displayed would require separate consent. What we could do is require them to put in a strategy for how they would direct customers to that particular car park. We could also add an informative to the decision notice, or if you'd like officers to write to Braintree Village to express a concern on that particular point in terms of traffic, we could also do that, or a combination of all three potentially. That would be my suggestion.
So a signage strategy, writing to Braintree Village, and what was the third?
And an informative on the decision notice just to highlight the concern about customers from outside the area navigating their way to the centre and making sure they're aware and able to access the car park that predominantly serves Braintree Village.
It might be even worth actually making sure that the postcode that they will use is the postcode for the car park beyond, if that is possible. But just Councillor Beevers first.
Thank you, Chairman. I think in terms of the obvious questions, we've sort of already covered that about the lighting, the flooding, and that's been resolved in the papers, and also the highway issue. I mean, we have got this interesting new kind of layout along the road anyway, coming from the Broad Road roundabout, insofar as we've got all these new yellow columns. And since the yellow columns have gone in, I mean, I don't think many of us completely understand what the methodology is going into the future, but it certainly seems to now have altered the flow of the traffic. So we all travel at, I think it's 50 and 40 most of the way there. And, we all use these roads regularly, and it just seems to have changed the pattern now of people's driving. So I don't know what the long-term plan is, but that seems to help. I would agree on the signage. I guess the thing I'm most interested in is the economic return. We, as a family and local friends, we use Freeport a lot. In fact, we eat at Freeport at least once a week. And even midweek, it's busy. You know, the restaurants are busy, and getting in the evening's quite good, actually. So I think this will really complement it. I'm interested, as I say, on the economic return and how we're going to communicate this, because it's great, you know, if you go to Birmingham or Manchester, which I do during the year, and you go to the Christmas market and you go around and do some skating, it's really good fun. So I think this would go down well, but I'd like to understand, I really would, we don't fully know in this report the return that we get from Freeport, and we don't know the percentage of who does and who doesn't use it. So I think really for me, a bit more information eventually on that would be really helpful. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, so I think it would be for the applicant to market their own facility, not for planning authority.
And sorry, Madam Chairman, just on that, I'm more than happy to second the proposal. Thank you.
Right. No. Who else did I have who wanted to? Did Councillor Hayes, did you want to speak? No, I wasn't sure whether you had your hand up. No. Okay.
Just echoing Councillor Beavis there, really. I think Freeport's a really good facility to have in the district, and having that a nice ring there over the Christmas period, bring that kind of Christmas market. So all the people that Councillor Bowles-Flint said that come in from the outside the district can use this facility. But with the parking, we could probably use like maybe instead of just a postcode, maybe a Watford and some more information about like Watford words, so they actually take them to the right area, because I know sometimes postcodes take you a different way on the Google Maps or whatever people use. So that's just the signage strategy we could use.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Yes, I mean, I think everybody's agreed. I think we'll have an economic benefit and a social benefit. Councillor Abbott, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to accept the suggestion on the signage. But just to correct Councillor Bowles-Flint, I don't believe that the site is within Cressing Ward. It's within Branch Town, I think you said it was. And secondly, of course, I'm acutely aware of the traffic problems. I was at a meeting nearly 30 years ago when the whole Galleys Corner development was being talked about, and was very concerned then about the extent of out-of-town development and how that would generate traffic. And of course, we have a lot more in the pipeline, 250 houses being built just across the road, the DIY store proposed off Millennium Way, and other developments. So I think that whole area is going to be even more soaked with traffic and peak time congestion than it is now. And I think there's wider issues there around how that's been allowed to build up through both what this council has done and obviously what planning inspectors have allowed in terms of 250 houses. But yeah, if the traffic's bad now, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, thank you. Point noted about the traffic. I think it's very disappointing that there's nothing from Essex, from Essex County Council Highways. They haven't even commented on this application. Councillor Bowles-Flint.
Just on a point of order, Madam Chairman, I didn't say that was in Councillor Abbott's ward. I'm well aware of where it is. I've lived there longer than he's been on this earth, so I quite know the ward and the area. But what I was trying to say, and what I did say, was it does affect his constituents greatly. Thank you.
Right, okay. Can I just ask Councillor Abbott, so you've moved this, are you also moving, if you accept the informative about the signage?
Absolutely.
And do we, Chris, are you clear what needs to go into the informative about signage and parking and everything?
So my suggestion in relation to the informative was probably more about the wider issues about parking and actually getting to the right car park, but we can put something, we can come up with a form of words there. And then in terms of the signage strategy, maybe it is slightly wider than just pure signage, which is a customer strategy for directing people to the right part of the site, so which may be potentially some signage, but also some other measures as well. So, but we can come up with a form of words, I think, in terms of what's included.
Thank you. Yeah, I think also the booking will be online, so I think it would be helpful to have the details probably when you book it will be quite clear in terms of where you're being directed to. And also, sorry, just to pick up a point you just mentioned in terms of highways, is that Essex County County Council as a highway authority did respond on the application, and they've raised no comments or no objections. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Well, I suppose that's better than not responding at all. Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Years ago, when Freeport, Cambridge Village, and it was first built, there used to be the free bus from the local, from the Braintree Town Centre out to the shopping centre. Obviously, this ice skating rink is going to be a fantastic draw from people within Braintree itself, let alone people coming in. There's no way we can persuade them to put on a free bus again just for 12 weeks. To help reduce traffic, because even locals drive to Freeport. So, just trying to think of other mitigations to reduce traffic. Thank you.
Would that be a reasonable request, Chris?
If I can help, there are currently ongoing discussions about that very thing, Councillor Hook. So it's there, not because of this, but it's because of the village.
So Councillor Bowes-Flint has answered the first bit of it in terms of the existing service. I think in terms of additional mitigation for this application, I'll just remind members just about the tests for conditions and obligations, and we would need to demonstrate that it is reasonable, it's necessary to make the development acceptable. So I think on those tests it would be very difficult to substantiate that the need to provide a new bus service purely for the ice rink, but I think there's the wider piece there in terms of the facility. But and obviously there will be link trips to this as well, so there'd be a link trip to Braintree Village, maybe the retail park and the ice rink, the restaurants and so forth. So
I think probably additional, such as with the information from Councillor Bowes-Flint, that's probably going to be very difficult to substantiate that requirement. So I think now I'm getting a little losses. I think Councillor Beavis moved it, or Councillor Abbott? Councillor Abbott moved it and you seconded it. And that is with the additional conditions regarding, well, the withdrawal of condition 9 and 10, I think, and amended plan numbers, additional conditions regarding lighting to cover, design and timing, and additional condition regarding, do we call it a signage strategy? A directional strategy, probably better. An informative, there's much helpful information we can put in there about the traffic problems and how they should alleviate them with directing people to the right place. Members, that has been moved and seconded. All those in favour of granting the application? That is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. And that brings us to the end of our meeting. So I shall close meeting at 8:29. Thank you, members.